Bryan Elliott. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Brand. Let's go check out our next story.
My name is Sanjay Dastur. I'm one of the co-founders and I'm the CEO of Boosted, and you're watching Behind the Brand.
Hi, I'm Bryan Elliott. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Brand. Today I'm here at Boosted Board headquarters with Sanjay Dastur, CEO and co-founder of Boosted Boards. Hey, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
I usually ask my guests, how'd you get this job?
Yeah, kind of by accident. So we didn't start working on this as the idea for a company. It was really just a side project that solved a problem we had, and we built it. We had the kind of technical expertise to build it, and then enough people wanted what we made that we decided to start turning it into a company.
What's the problem that Boosted is solving?
So we initially were solving a problem we had when we were graduate students on a pretty spread out campus. This is at Stanford University. We were graduate students and we wanted to get between certain buildings, and you often might be spending 30 minutes to go do a 2 or 3 minute errand somewhere. Maybe that's getting from the campus to downtown, maybe it's getting between buildings, maybe it's getting back to your car where you parked to go somewhere. And so the board was a way to quickly get between those places without a lot of overhead the way you might have even with something like a bicycle, which is super convenient because you have to lock and unlock it. You can't put it in the car with you. So it solved that problem, and it turns out that problem also exists in a lot of other places where there's a lot of density and vehicles generally tend to be a little bit slower.
So you were a graduate student. Is this your first idea right out of the box?
No, I mean, it wasn't the first side project we had. It was, we had worked on a lot of really fun projects just, as engineers tinkering on things. This was the first one I think that people chased us wanting to buy what we had made, and that's really what made us think that there might be a business there.
So what made you decide to crowdfund this? Because I remember early on when you kickstarted it and all that. Walk us through that process.
Yeah, so we looked at crowdfunding as a way to do a few things. One was, it lets people get behind something in a really emotional way that didn't really exist with retail products before. So, not only are you supporting something, but you know that other people are supporting it too. You can see how many of them there are. You can trade comments with them. You can have a conversation. You watch the product come to life. So there's that emotional component that was really great.
And you have skin in the game too. You get.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very involved, it's not just you buying something from some faceless, nameless place. And then the other piece was that it gave us a lot of, an idea of how much capital do we need to build these first units. It gave us the capital, it gave us an idea of scale, so we could start, going to manufacturers and getting the pieces we need in the right quantity. So it was great for a lot of reasons.
Let's talk about crowdfunding for just a second. And, a lot of people watch this show, they're in startup mode or they've got this great idea or invention. What mistakes did you make?
Oh, we made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty complex product. We didn't estimate the cost of the product initially very well. So, we'd used off-the-shelf parts, we built it up, we launched this crowdfunding campaign, and then we found out, oh, well, actually, this thing's going to break after 3 months. This other part's going to break after 6 months just by testing it. And so by upgrading those systems and designing those systems to be better, we turned out the cost was higher. So, that was just one mistake. We didn't estimate how long things would take us. We didn't estimate how many people we would need to help us. So those were all things that we learned as we went. And fortunately, the other advantage of Kickstarter and crowdfunding sites is that by building a relationship with those early customers, they're also going to be a lot more forgiving and be willing to wait and help you through the process.
Let's go back to the business part of it. This isn't a recreational sport. You didn't build these for recreation, although they're super fun. Yeah. You see it more as a kind of alternative to driving or riding a bicycle. What are you guys doing to sort of lay that foundation with, like on the city level or just, skateboarding culture, you've already got that. Like, we know how to ride a skateboard, we know how it works, and the people who ride. Mm-hmm. But there's a whole population that, is still driving or riding a bicycle or whatever. How are you getting people to convert?
Yeah, so we're really focusing on the problem that it solves. So people didn't, they weren't born knowing how to drive. They learn how to drive because it solves a problem for them. So actually we see a fair number of our customers, never skateboarded before, including myself. So we've really been driving towards, how do you educate people about the problem? How do you find out where the problem is compelling enough that this solves that problem for them? And then how do you help them as much as possible? So that might include, helping them learn how to ride. It might include supporting them after they get the product. It might include answering their questions. So we kind of try to take care of them as much as we can through the whole process.
Are you getting any backlash from like at the city level? Like, hey, these things are illegal, or you can't ride this here, or like how are you forging those relationships and overcoming those barriers? Because I know that in some places in New York, for example, like there's a place to ride bikes, mm-hmm. there's a place to walk, run, and ride skateboards, mm-hmm. and yet this is a skateboard that happens to be electric, but you can't ride it there legally.
So what we found is that there are people who use it recreationally, but there's a lot of people who use it as transportation. And when they do, they're often increasing their transit usage, they're decreasing their car usage. They don't require infrastructure investment from the city. They don't require subsidies the way a lot of alternative transportation does.
Right, so it's a no-brainer for the city, but how are you convincing the unconvinced?
I mean, mostly by what we just said, what we just talked about, and also, like people, like happy people.
Whoa, this has a lot more kick. Holy smokes. It's the best boosted boarder I've ever seen! These guys are so good!
So like, the best spokespeople for whether or not this works and whether or not cities should support it is a lot of riders who are saying this improved my life. And so that actually ends up being much more powerful than anything we could say as just an organization.
So you need it to be a groundswell from the people who are using it to tell the government or whatever that this is what they want.
Well, I would say with any place, you see different regulations in different states and in different countries, and we've been very careful and very supportive to like push for the regulatory side of this and the safety side of it just as much as the recreational or kind of fun side. So we take battery safety really seriously. We take rider safety and education and like safety equipment like helmet usage really seriously as well. And so generally you see some places that are willing to adopt new regulations more rapidly and some that are slower, but generally they're all supportive, and we know we're working with them as fast as they're able to work and as they're able to change.
Yeah, maybe talk about how that's affected how you've developed this second iteration and how you're then going to take it international.
Yeah, so the second generation board has a lot of improvements that people have asked for. So we've increased the range with an extended battery pack. It turns out that also means you can't take it on an airplane with you. So we still have a standard pack that gives you the same amount of range that you can remove and carry on a plane. We made it water resistant so it doesn't get damaged if you go through a puddle. We've made the parts much more modular so you can replace them if there's a problem instead of sending it back to us like you do now. So we've really addressed a lot of user complaints that once again we learned about through those channels and by talking to all of those people. And then we've really focused on the things that make it a better vehicle. And we've really focused our efforts on how do you make this thing reliable, dependable, something that you'd use every day, something that fits into your life in a better way. That's really what drove that second gen product.
That's awesome. Let's go back to kind of, you being the CEO and at the helm of this brand. I know you have a great team and you probably have a lot of people who support. I guess I want to bring this up because people who are innovating or trying to innovate or creating something new, they often get stuck. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like where you've been stuck before and how you've gotten through it?
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten stuck a lot. And I think one of the really early valuable pieces of advice we got from one of the programs we went through that support startups was they brought in people from really great companies, like really public companies, who told the stories of those companies' early days, and they said, yep, everything was, we got stuck as well, and that's okay. And that you really want to be thinking about how do you get unstuck? Like don't become paralyzed and be unable to act on something. You might, instead of being worried about making the wrong choice, just make sure you try something and learn from your users again, talk to them, build the product, and eventually you'll find the right path.
So what's something that's gone wrong?
Oh man, where to start? So one of the things that happened really early was we had the product that we had kind of specced out, right? The product, and none of the people who worked on this with us had ever shipped something before. And then we found out, kind of as we were ready to ship it, that it cost too much. Like it cost more to make than we thought it was going to, and it cost, in fact, more to make than we planned to charge for it. And so we had to raise the price initially for people who were really looking forward to buying this thing, and then they found out how much it was going to cost, and they got really upset. And so, we looked at all of our options. We looked at, selling it for less than it cost to make, and that doesn't work as a business. And so we had to pick a path where we, increased the price, we worked on it, and then we worked really hard, the entire team, to get the cost down. And that's where we are now today. So, but we rolled with it, and you can't just stop doing things because there's an obstacle in your way.
Yeah, that's great. In terms of looking at the next 12, 24, 36 months, what keeps you up at night? Like, what are you afraid of? What are you watching out for? Is it competition? Is it like cost of goods? Is it like new governments? Like, what is it?
Yeah, so I think, as far as the competition goes, it's actually a good thing that there's more companies building light vehicles. Whether it's skateboards, whether it's other types of platforms, like the more people who are using these types of products, the better.
Helps the adoption rate.
Helps the adoption rate. It validates that they're useful. People think of them differently than if it's just a few people using it. If they see, think about bicycles, right? Bicycles used to be a novelty, and now they're actually, like a legitimate form of transportation in many cities and have lanes dedicated to them.
Yeah, if you go to Amsterdam, no one drives. It's like all bikes, right?
Exactly, yeah. So, I think of competition as something that's good, right? Like, it's so early in this industry that the more products that are out there, the better. And from an operations perspective, like now we've shown people really want this thing. And so now the question is, how do we scale up our operations, in a tight way, right? We're not just, seeing if people want something. Now we got to think about, all the different pieces of getting it to people. What happens if they have a problem with the product? How do we help them? How do we handle a return? How do we provide support to somebody in another country? So those are all little problems that we're solving along the way, but less of it is, does anybody want this? Which is really what you focus on as an early company.
Do you think it's to your advantage to stay small? I mean, like, you're not a $1 billion company yet, but like, is it your plan to go $1 billion, or you want to stay tight?
So our plan is, the product that we have right now is really magical. Like, people really love the product. And we find that making something magical for people is a pretty compelling reason to get up and go to work in the morning. Having really grateful customers, having people who tell us this changed their life, having people who are big fans and like just evangelize the product, like that's a great reason to do things. And so we see it as, well, the more people we can reach and provide that magic to, the better. And so we'll just kind of keep that as our goal. And if we build a business around that as well, that operates well, then we can fund more people to build more great things for our customers, and that cycle keeps happening.
Yeah, are you thinking about other products? You have something in the works you want to share?
Yeah.
Just between us, we won't tell anyone?
Yeah. We're working on a lot of really cool things. We don't think a skateboard is the platform that's, everyone in the world is going to be using, and that's not the intention of it. But we think a lot of the technology we're developing, we think a lot of the ideas we've had around vehicle design apply to products beyond just skateboards, and so that's something we're thinking about too.
So are you doing collaborations, like with other brands or big companies? There's been a lot of talk about an Apple car and things like that. Is that the kind of thing you guys are exploring, collaboration?
Collaboration can be great in certain cases. I think all these different companies. There's a lot of innovation in the car lane happening. There's all these other kinds of. There's a question about companies like Apple coming into the car lane and bringing technology there that wasn't there before.
Do you think they're going to develop a car?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I like all my other Apple products, so I think that if they did develop a car, it'd probably be pretty interesting.
I think Elon was recently quoted as saying, the person I'm worried about most is Apple.
I mean, if Apple builds really great stuff, but so does Tesla, and so there's a lot of people innovating in the car lane, and we're trying to take some of those same ideas, around computation and sensing and connectivity, and just like thinking about like what's going to be different about the car lane, and saying, hey, like you could build really great products, like the boosted board, that are just as much about the technology pieces as they are about the fact that it's a skateboard.
There's a lot happening right now. There's a lot of content being produced. There's a lot of products being pushed out there in the market. A lot of people are trying stuff. It's a great time to be alive. But do you think like now is a difficult time to launch something new, or do you think it's the best time?
I think it's the best time compared to doing it later. I think like one of the principles that we again learned from one of these programs we were in was that it's better to make a few people really love you than a lot of people kind of feel ambivalent about you. And so we launched with that ethos and said we were going to build something for, the first version of this that we built, we just built 5 of them and we sold those. And those 5 people, we made sure that they loved the product before we tried to build more of them. And so, that's a less challenging thing to take on than saying, how do we build something that 1 million people will love or 1 billion people will love? And that's a good way to think about things really early on, is figure out how to make a small group really feel strongly about what you're building.
Let's talk about metrics. So you have VC money. You've got to satisfy them. You've got to keep yourselves happy and innovative. How are you measuring success besides just how many boards you're selling and whether the cost of goods is going down? What else should we be thinking about? And again, I'm thinking about some of these other people who are in different industries or doing different things.
I mean, we actually think about success as happy users, as happy riders. It doesn't make sense to sell a bunch of product to people who aren't going to use it. And so we think of it as, how many of the people that are buying this thing, is it really right for them? If we have a really generous return policy because we want someone who's not using it to say, hey, it's not for me, and we're happy to take it back. So we think of success as happy users. And that's really a really good guiding principle. It helps you, simplify and focus on the right things.
Yeah. You're an entrepreneur. You probably got other things in the works. Do you think entrepreneurs are born like they are with certain characteristics or trait, or do you think it's something we can learn?
I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. My goal was never to start something. It was more just, I'd worked in academic kind of robotics and engineering positions before. I think being entrepreneurial is about being, in some ways intellectually curious and wanting to understand how things work a little.
That's similar to engineering. You've got to try stuff that doesn't work, right?
Well, and outside of engineering. I think, great people in a bunch of different fields are all people who are thinking about things in a new way. And also being somewhat empathetic and saying, okay, well, can I read between the lines and listen to what other people are telling me? And then it's just kind of a question of at some point, how easily do you give up on things? So some folks get frustrated, and one of the things that motivates us, I think, is not letting each other down, is not letting down the people who count on us, like our customers, and that becomes a really powerful motivation as well. So I think it's not something that I would say that we were born with. It's more just something that we, that you learn as you go.
How about creativity? How do you stay creative? How do you stay sharp?
By not trying to, I guess. I think we just. We're really open to new things. We don't, there's things we're careful not to have too much of a plan about. And what that does is it lets us listen to our customers and be able to react and be flexible. So even small things like the way we've handled customer support, that wasn't a plan that we implemented that we wrote a long time ago. It's something that's evolved over time where, and you have to be okay with stuff kind of being broken from time to time, but that's all right because you can fix them. And hopefully they're breaking because, you're growing, which is the case with us. So, we just kind of learned as we went, and that I think is, staying out of people's way to implement things like that they think would work. That's a good way for an organization to be creative as it grows.
Awesome. My final question, maybe not even a question, look in this camera and give, whether they're engineers, creative, label themselves as entrepreneurs or whatnot, give them some advice about starting a business, launching a product, everything that you've just done and are in the process of doing. The struggle is real. Give us some advice.
Oh, some advice for entrepreneurs. I think the biggest thing for us is that we didn't really set out to try to create a business. We really just set out to try to make some people happy. And I think whether that, your customers, whether they're other businesses or whether they're consumers, that should be your guiding principle, is making just a few people happy and then figuring out how that works. And hopefully that's something that scales to a certain level that you can build a business out of. But we've never thought of it too much as, let's start a business first and then let's figure out what it does later. It was much more about working on something that we liked and that we could make other people like as well. So stick to that, and that's a pretty good guiding principle.